political drama continues to play itself out, and yet not really, as we're seeing signs of what could be signs of jockeying for position. But then now the question is, how much of it is bait and switch? How much of it is just a smokescreen? How much of it is what is expected? Perfunctory. How much of it is, well, I say this because I'm expected to say this, and then you say that, and do I really mean it? Am I hiding my true intentions? Am I biding my time, or am I going to step out aggressively? Meanwhile, we may get into that later, but another bait and switch is going on, and that is with regards to, I think a bait and switch is going on with regards to the oil spill cleanup and the efforts to bring the perpetrators to justice. Except, based on what we've seen so far, I do wonder if this is the best way to go about doing this, if this is the most effective way. Now, to some extent, we're getting assistance from 2 international funds, and the whole point is we do need to, in good faith, try to go after who we believe to be the perpetrators of this whole situation. Now, it's interesting that Tobago was approved 50 million, but we're trying to claim 244 million. You know? I would like to see what the central government's expenditure bill is, and what the THA's expenditure bill is, and how is it the THA gets 50 million and we're claiming, you know, like, just, it's one of those things where transparency would make this whole situation a lot easier to deal with and to bear, and a lack thereof kind of leaves us with too much questions. So that's maybe one bait and switch. Remember, Tobago only needed 50 million. Again, how much money was directly spent by central government, et cetera, et cetera. And how do they, a lot of the times, estimating costs is not just about, it's not so simple as to say, well, this is what the costs are. Sometimes accounting is, what do you attribute to be a profit or a loss or a cost? How do you do the bookkeeping? What might be a debate of semantics in financial terms would be a debate of entries and classifications. But then the other bait and switch is the fact that, okay, Solar Creed has been arrested in Angola. Cool. And that is performance is the term. PNM style, right. Notice how we have no reporting on the owner. So then the question we have to ask is, does the government have a person to hold liable, or do they just have a tugboat? Because unless this tugboat is worth $244 million, arresting the tugboat doesn't mean anything, really. And if the tugboat isn't worth $244 million, what most likely will happen is, if we don't have a name to go after, the owner of said tugboat should be able to do it's simple math. Tugboat less than 244, you abandon tugboat. You ain't gonna come back and try to claim your boat. You just start, that boat no longer exists to you. That is, I would imagine, a pretty obvious observation. So then now, where is the performance? Because without actually having someone to hold liable, we ain't getting that money. Unless, like I said, this tugboat is worth that much, which I kind of don't expect it to be worth 244 million. So then now, more information forthcoming would be nice if you want to run your victory lap around the Senate chamber, I think that, which is where this was said. And if you can't get us more information, well then we could only leave with the speculation to assume the conclusion that performance PNM style means we're going to boast about nothing and achieve nothing, except we'll get maybe not just the consolation prize, but the dregs of the consolation prize. Now, that might not be the case, but I would argue if you want to give us the tip of the iceberg and then want to exclaim how great you are, you will please excuse me for not taking it seriously. Now, the truth is they might have names and they might be well on their way to get the money, and maybe they don't want to reveal certain information. I get that. But there's ways to do that and to communicate your intentions a lot more effectively. But unfortunately, such things are outside the realm of the performance of the PNM, or rather, that's just not their style. I mean, to be fair, that's not the style of most politicians, but I digress. So they tracked down a barge and arrested a barge. That means nothing. That's like saying our flood prevention plan is to clear drains. It's like, basic maintenance is the plan. That's a good plan. Yeah, that's a great plan, That's like saying our crime plan is to pay police officers' wages. It's almost like if the Minister of Finance, he's following the examples of holding an event to herald the opening of a standpipe. That is performance, PNM style. All right, with that said, a lot to get through today. Didn't have a lot of chances this week, but there's some stories I want to touch on. So, of course, we'll go straight in today's daily review. All right, first story I want to get to. Because everyone's talking about, Golden Boy, is he or isn't he? The Wonder Boy, the Wonder Bread, etc., etc. Stuart Young, next head of the PNM, blah, 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 blah. 9. That's not what the most interesting story this week for me is. The most interesting story for me, and maybe this is because of the reporting, or maybe the reporting is highlighting something important. The Minister of Energy decided to defend the government's sale of the refinery, but he did it in a very interesting way. It's a very interesting way. Because on one hand, he's saying, yes, we will be moving forward to sell the refinery. No, we're not going to scrap the process now. Blah, 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 blah. But then he said a lot of things about how refineries globally are being closed down. State-of-the-art refineries in India. India. If Jindal wanted a refinery, there's one in his backyard. And he was pointing to the fact that, and he was trying to make a case to defend the closure of Petrotrin. But then he had to use a very interesting line that the government will try. They will not reopen the refinery in a way that burdens taxpayers. What does that supposed to mean to us at this stage? You mean to tell me that you have been going through a process where potentially, because it seems as though people are soliciting them to buy the refinery. That's what he's saying, right? But is it that there's that some of these officers are that impractical? What does that mean at this stage? Because essentially, and this is where again, let me just point out the fact that I find that politicians in Trinidad and Tobago tend to be very, very unskilled at communication, unskilled at the nuances and subtleties of communication and public messaging, and by extension, unskilled at how do you communicate when you are a leader in a leadership position and you're trying to guide people. I mean, they understand the concepts and they utilize them. They just apparently utilize them very clumsily at best and disastrously at worst. In this case, this is more of a clumsy situation, because if you want to tell people, we're selling this refinery, you've been using it as a campaign point. You put it in the budget. One of your special parts of the budget is to sell this thing. And now you're saying, well, we won't do it if it's a burden to the taxpayers. You haven't figured that part out yet? Are you somehow magically still getting offers and entertaining proposals that might have that as a possibility? Is this performance P&M style? Someone please explain this to me. What is the point of saying this now? And then utilizing language to point out how difficult it is to run a refinery, not just now, but in the past. Pointing to the fact that there are other newer refineries out there that are closed. How does this then support the position that we could confidently reopen this one, which has not only been shut down under mothballs for quite some time, but is significantly old to begin with? And let's not forget, Port of Spain has done everything they can to alienate one Guyanese businessman, and our politics is apparently not too far behind in general from doing everything it can to alienate, at least to some extent, the political scene of Guyana on a whole. Let's just put it that way. Where we getting things to refine? We're gonna get them from Russia, Ukraine, the Middle East? Where, what's the obvious advantage of our location? Because if we have to import things from somewhere far from where we are, well, you could do the same thing anywhere else in the world. So if there are other refineries out there that may or may not be available to be reopened, what's so special about ours? That it's cheap? And then now, if we have to sell it on a deal, how close are we for it to be a burden on the taxpayers? One could argue it already is a burden on the taxpayers. Let's move on. I don't know, next story, I don't know the Minister of Tourism personally. I don't know his effectiveness because his ministry is nowhere near close to being supported enough to do anything significant with regards to the industry. All I know is this. He said something silly, and he is performing in a typical political way, dare I say P&M style, but we've seen this from the UNC and even the TPP, to some extent the COP, other parties, right? Whatever Jack Warner calls his party, no, he ended it. But we've seen it. We've seen it from politicians. What am I talking about? The doubling down. The putting your foot in your mouth, saying something stupid, and then acting as though it's your fault that you don't get the joke. Because half the time, it really makes you feel as though what they said had to have been a joke. Now, I understand the point he's trying to make, but again, doesn't seem to understand the subtleties of communication. Because you have a sore spot with your population right now. So the minister said, go out and see the standard of living in the rest of the world. And now he's doubling down on that. He's doubling down on that position, and he's reiterating his message. And the point that I tried to make, and it's seemingly lost on him, so I guess maybe I do need to now consider maybe Mr. Mitchell is not the sharpest tool in the shed. By doing this, you highlight significant deficiencies of your own administration. The obvious one is the foreign exchange situation. It's a problem for the country. So you're telling the people, hey, go do this in an attempt to defend your government by highlighting another problem. That's just brilliant, right? But then it gets worse, because if you really want the people of TNT to compare the deficiencies that they complain about on a daily basis with the standard of living in foreign countries, raise your hand if you think that's a bad idea. We're already suffering this brain drain situation. We're already suffering limited job opportunities. We're already suffering the perception of widespread corruption. And a crime problem. There are crime problems abroad, I get that, but you know how it is. The grass is always green on the other side. But the key point is, it is a proven and known fact that at the end of the day, there are just more opportunities out there. And in many ways, there are things out there that we will look at with envy and jealousy. Yes, we're a small island country that has its challenges and its advantages. But when you live in a small island nation, you don't necessarily look at the advantages as much as the people who are not living in a small island nation. The grass is always green at the other side. But you're a politician, and you're playing a game of perception and communication and managing expectations. So you're actively, this is your plan. This is your plan. Don't look at this problem. This problem, right, is not, the economy, it's not so bad, right? When you compare us to foreign economies. And you're bringing up economies like the UK, if my memory serves correct. Yeah, bringing up some lesser situation where measurable statistics, they are rated less than TNT. You're talking Canada, US, UK. I think the proof is in the pudding that people leave here to live there. They don't leave there quite as much to live here. Now, it's an apples to oranges comparison, but you've opened the door to say, hey, when you compare us to them, we're great, right? The grass is always green on the other side. It's an unfair comparison because we will always look at what we don't have. And as a politician, you're encouraging that, and I just find that hilarious. But hey, you know, at the end of the day, he has a PR person probably in his office who, if that PR person is worth their salt, which in TNT I have yet to run into, unless you're a yes man or a brown noser. On average, most PR people that I have met and students in communication courses, at least in COSTAT, I'll call out the name, Ken Gordon's Student Journalism, tend to be really smart. Or at least smarter than the average bear. And this is just one more example because, hey, they have the experts advising them, right? But for communication, they never seem to listen. And remember I said the PNM, they seem to be lacking in the PR department. Don't look at the PRO of the PNM. That is a failed experiment. I want to move on. This is something I may have mentioned before, but I want to bring it up again. Because there were some articles, this is a minor story, but it's a pet peeve of mine because I think these articles only come out at these times and they give the wrong impression on how you judge an industry. Because Tobago Carnival, rooms are booked out. everything is full. Things are looking good, blah, 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 blah. And I think similar things might have happened for like the August vacation, Great Race, Easter, the actual Trinidad Carnival week as well. At one point was a popular time to go to Tobago to get away from it all. I haven't been there in a while, so I can't say. Christmas, New Year's, you know. We get reporting, we get stories on these key popular points. And when we full, this season is great, this event is good, we get money this weekend. Therein lies the problem. We get money this weekend. And I've always wondered to what extent people want to judge tourism at the peaks. It doesn't matter if we're full for Carnival, whether Trinidad or Tobago. I mean, let me take that back. It matters if we're full in the sense of we don't want to be empty. We don't want to be empty. But then I do wonder if we take the wrong lessons from being full. Like, you see, we're full. Things are great. Maybe we could add more rooms. Like, no. That's not how it works. For the industry to survive, the hotels need to have income throughout the year, not just at limited peak times. We don't need expansion. We need a market. And Tobago Carnival is not a market, it's an event. Just like Trinidad Carnival is an event. And Trinidad Carnival has many events, so the period is a lot more extended. And I would love to see that for Tobago as well. But right now it's one weekend. And with Trinidad Carnival, it is a series of weeks. That doesn't make a tourism industry. So heralding how great these bursts, these spikes are, doesn't mean anything. That's not how the other islands operate. Yeah, they'll have the events and the special events and the special promotions and what have you. But to some extent, they also have regular visitors on a weekly basis. And Tobago Carnival, at the end of the day, it might seem like a big deal. And to some extent, it's a big deal. But in terms of the benefits to the island, it's one weekend for most of the secondary industries that support it. For the bands, for the artists, sure, it is a big deal. Getting another carnival is a big deal. Because you might still have events in Tobago for the carnival at the start of the year. So you get two opportunities now to have a major bite at that part of the apple. But for the tourism side, it's nice, it's good. You want it to be full. That doesn't. And I fear a lot of the decision makers look at things like, we need more rooms for carnival. And then what happens? Yeah, well, May, everything's empty. September, October, everything's empty, etc., etc. So, I just want to caution that. Last story, I do want to mention this. I find this is the head of the Tobago Council, who's now a senator. Congrats to him. That's not an obvious ploy to try to get support in Tobago. No. And right now, it's not looking like a great one. Now, I'll admit, I tend to like what Mr. Dennis does and how he communicates, but I'm disappointed this time. So, it is what it is, right? Blaming the UNC for a lack of development in Tobago in 2024 after 10 years of the PNM. This is brilliant. Blaming the THA for a lack of development in Tobago. When the THA is basically saying, you're spending more money to renovate Trinidad Hilton than you're giving us for development. And more importantly, because $200-something million is the THA supposed to build a hospital with that amount of money and do other developmental programs? And let's not forget, the development is coming from central government's planning and budget. So it's very interesting how convenient Mr. Dennis is basically saying, oh, well, you know, the THA ain't doing much and the UNC didn't do much. But then the PNM-THA administration, by what measure did they do anything with the same 4% allocation, with the same limited developmental budget allocation? Let's not forget, the THA PNM, the THA under the PNM did not start the airport project. That was central government. What development did the THA and the PNM do? They had a similar budget constraints, and we saw similar limited action from them. The one good thing about the situation is, I have to say, well, the PNM are consistent. They treated the THA the same way when they were in power in Tobago, so at least it's not inconsistent now that they've lost the THA. But I've yet to see the THA have control of the actual developmental dollars, and essentially the budget confirmed that again, the development of the island is being controlled by central government. So if you want to point to a lack of anything, that's basically a significant amount, if not the entire story right there. So I don't understand Mr. Dennis's complaints, because he's putting things on the record. And let's just say the next THA election, they come into power. If the status quo doesn't change, and if it does, it's unfair, and he could be called a hypocrite because of it. But if it doesn't, someone is going to just dig this up, you know. Because a lot of its arguments, for the most part, I mean, he's pointing out, oh, well, we don't have we spend Virgin Atlantic packing. Those deals with foreign airlines, it's not so simple. More importantly, he pointed, oh, well, we have the airport. The new airport is expected to attract significant new airlift. Well, he said to the airline. I don't know if he meant to the island or if it was a misprint. But again, just that statement alone, it's a lazy statement, because I understand people think that we need a new airport, fine. Let's just go with that promise that Tobago needs a new airport. Does it need one for 3 million people? Because the language from some politicians, like here, suggests that there is a belief somehow that airlines will fly to Tobago, will add more flights. I mean, they're flying already, so a lack of infrastructure is not necessarily the issue, right? They're flying already. There are less flights now than there were in the past. One could argue with a better airport, there'll be a better ability to fly to Tobago, but it's not impossible. But too many times, the airport sounds as though airlines and their passengers will come to Tobago for the airports. Like if somehow that's a great tourist attraction. Now maybe if we did something like Japan and built a whole new island in the middle of the ocean, then it might become a tourist attraction. But something tells me our airport will be an airport. And who determines their destination of where they want to vacation because of the airport? The airport could be crappy. What happens if the airport is crappy? You go to the destination because you want to go there, you complain about the airport, and you suffer through it. That's what happens. So, a lot of what he said was very shallow, was very surface level, was very meaningless. And I think, similar to his compatriot, his comrade, Minister Mitchell, if you dig deep enough, the PNM does not come out looking great. So he's highlighting things that I think make the PNM look bad. Maybe you disagree with me, but you can call in later and have your say on that. Let's take a break now. When we come back, I'll welcome my co-host. Stay tuned.
Transform your home with PCU Plus. From stylish furniture to the latest appliances, we have everything you need to create your perfect space. At PCU Plus, we offer fair prices and affordable financing options that are cheaper than hire purchase agreements. With convenient locations in San Fernando, Tobago, Arima, and our lifestyle showroom in Barataria, you're never far from the best deals. Visit PCU Plus today and discover why we're the top choice for quality furniture and appliances. PCU Plus, quality you trust, prices you'll love. Visit one of our locations or find us online to start transforming your home today.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
And we're back here talking about the WSN, the content capital. Sean Michael Small here. Joined by my co-host, the one and only, Mr. Keaton Shah.
Morning, Sean Michael Small. How are you doing? How are you keeping? It's a wonderful Friday, isn't it?
Well,
never mind.
Apparently, my allergies to the political comments have been acting up on overdrive even more than last week, right? That's all I'll say about that. The poor form of communication, and I don't understand. Like this is maybe why they don't talk a lot, because sometimes when they do, woo boy, the communicator in me, the commentator in me is all for it. Like, if you say something stupid or intelligent, I'm happy, something for me to speak about. But the communicator in me is basically like, oh gosh, please stop, don't stop doing this, stop doing this. Minister, Senator, MP, please stop. And I don't know if you have been potentially feeling similar, because I don't know if it's, part of it is the budget debate, part of it is the jockeying for position for the general. And of course, I didn't realize the PNM are gonna blunder so much that they're gonna expose the facts so readily that it seems as though internally the jockeying for leadership is a thing.
Yeah, what have they blundered, to be exact?
Well, I think how they handle the cancellation of their convention. Because they canceled it, that's number one. And then they basically didn't say anything except to confirm that it was canceled, not postponed. And I just found that it was very, very hard to not interpret that as there being some sort of weakness in the party, because why would you cancel a convention like that?
According to Stuart Young and Camille Robertson Rees, it was strategic on the part of the People's National Movement. Of course, one can speculate and suggest that there are cracks within the People's National Movement on the basis that Robert Le Hunt, who resigned, by the way, as a public utilities minister because of difference in policy and approach to dealing with, I think it was specifically WASA, and the government's approach going forward were two different things. So because of the conflict, he resigned. He was vice chairman of PNM as well, and he resigned from that position. He's still a party member. He has spoken unfavorably of the situation. Freddie Ferreira also, who is a founding member of the PNM, also spoke. I don't want to say he spoke unfavorably, but it seems as though he was quite shocked as per, again, what is happening. And this is all based on what we know, so we are speculating a lot. Stuart Young has come out and said this is a strategy. Camille Robinson or Regis has come out and said this is a strategy. But they're not going to reveal the strategies. I don't expect them to. Foster Cummings, who, by the way, was another name touted in the media as a potential candidate, and possibly the individual who could actually battle it out with Stuart Young for leadership, has come out and said, in defense of the situation, there was a vote that took place in Bally's House last weekend, and one newspaper report indicated that it was unanimous. Another newspaper report indicated no, it wasn't, because Jennifer Batiste Primus voted against the whole situation of postponing the convention and the internal elections. So, Sean, there's obviously a lot of confusion. There's a lot of speculation. There are a lot of question marks. One thing is for certain, and the fact remains that the role for political leader is not of a contention until 2026. That's fact, right? That is fact. So we can sit back, we can watch, and enjoy our popcorn along the way, but we can only speculate at this particular point. There's very little that we can debate on when it comes to what is happening within the People's National Movement, because there's very little that has been given to us. With the opposition, there was a lot more because of the comments coming from the opposition leader, from members of the STAR team, and then, of course, when they had the internal election, and, of course, the 5 individuals who have now been labeled as dissidents. So, sit back and enjoy it. Silly season is in full swing.
Well, I actually wanted to ask you, because I mentioned earlier this week, I mentioned that
it seems as though the brain fog is kicking in.
Yeah,
it's been a long week, hasn't it? It's been a very long week.
It's kicking. Right. You said, I got it. The 2026 political leader, that's when it's up for grabs, right? This is what I want to ask you, and I can't remember if we've spoken about this either off air or on air before. But just in case I have forgotten that conversation, apparently I'm prone to do that. I don't like the fact that we're going to have an election in 2025, and then we're going to have a political leader change, apparently, in 2026. Because let's assume that the PNM wins the election, because one would think that you should make that assumption because of this scenario. While I acknowledge that it probably is very legal, and in a perfect world, this actually won't be that much of a problem if our political parties were formulated by actually, this is our ideology, this is how we operate, these are our ideals, and our approaches and our philosophies on how we govern the country. So when we have succession planning, it's still going to be the same party. But I don't really see that. What I do see is the political leader is very important in election. Just like the American election, that's why they made Biden step down if he didn't voluntarily do so, right? Behind the scenes, we don't know what happened there. But they made him step down because re-electing him became untenable. So, to some extent, we look at who's at the top of the ticket more than any other name. It's the party and the political leader, right? And potentially, what you're telling voters who will vote for the PNM is, you're going to vote for Dr. Keith Rowley, but then you're going to potentially, if enough people vote for him, you'll be governed by somebody else. Doesn't that rub you the wrong way?
Not necessarily, and I'll tell you why. I'm waiting for nomination day to conclude, because I'm curious to know whether or not the Prime Minister is even going to contest the general election. That is the first hint. You see, theoretically speaking, you can be the political leader of a party and not be an MP, theoretically speaking. However, the Prime Minister is the leader of the party that commands the majority within the House of Representatives. And that is why I'm interested to know whether or not the Prime Minister is actually going to be contesting the next election. So I can better answer your question when we have an idea following the closure of nominations. If the Prime Minister is not contesting for the next election, then, who knows, you may have a point. But at the same time, put it this way, Sean Michael Small, in this particular instance, if Dr. Keith Rowley did not run in the last internal election, he was still a sitting MP, he was still a Prime Minister, but he might not have been political leader. I think nomination day is key to getting a better understanding as to what's happening with Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. If he is still going up to be an elected representative, then we will have even more question marks. But bear in mind, though I hear your point, as long as an individual is a sitting MP, it would be easier for them to become, in that sense, political leader and Prime Minister during a term. They can be political leader, they might not be Prime Minister. I don't know. It's a bit confusing at this point, but just bear in mind, the fact is we have to wait until nomination day happens before I can better answer your question.
Now the thing is, you bring up an interesting scenario. Are you thinking it's possible that the Prime Minister may attempt to retain his leadership of the party to try to shepherd in his successor without going up for elections? Is that the proposal? Because there's a part of me that thinks that if he has enough party support, that might work, except usually the moment he is no longer relevant in the national elections, his internal power could very, very quickly evaporate. And I don't know if it will be practical for him to do so. So you bring up an interesting scenario that I don't think I've ever seen anything that might work quite like that. Usually it would not. Usually you have to be active in order to retain enough power. And if he doesn't retain enough power, then his political leadership will be a lame duck situation that will be in name only, because in theory, whoever it is that will be jockeying for position to be the Prime Minister, however they get there, will essentially be the political leader.
If the Prime Minister is not going to contest the 2025 general election, and I say 2025 because that is when it is due, and the more and more I think about it, I can't see it being to the benefit of the Prime Minister nor the People's National Movement for holding an earlier than expected general election, at least in 2024. We've only got, 2 months left? Still enough time to call a general election. I don't think it'll happen then. But if he is not contesting as, going up for a post as MP, then it'll be interesting to know whether or not the strategy on the part of the PNM for delaying the internal election would include the Prime Minister stepping down as political leader before the next general election, seeing out his term of Prime Minister whenever that election date is called, and a new political leader of the People's National. Again, it's due until 2026.
But
he resigns as political leader because he's not going up as an MP, then of course the PNM will have to hold an internal election to have a new political leader. Because
right now, again, like you pointed out, all we can do is speculate. So the speculation is, and I think it's reasonable to think this, well, they cancel the thing in November because they can't do it now. All this talk about the PNM is strategic, I would like to see any practical indicator of any actual strategic thinking coming out of the party. Because they're so strategic, they made 2 Balize houses. and they're not the same project, right? More on that later. They're so strategic. They knock down the old Balazi house to build a thing to then rebuild.
Sure.
But
If I may just interject and tell you that in my the lessons I've learned in the time that we have hosted Talking Point together, I mean, I have not had the best things to say about the opposition. I have not had the best things to say about the government. But if it's one thing that I've learned, do not undermine the ability, the power, and don't even undermine the thinking on the part of the People's National Movement, and by extension, the United National Congress. We may be very much surprised, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, and this is coming from an individual who has had very unfavorable opinions of both institutions. But I know not to undermine either. We should not undermine either,
well,
because they know what they're doing.
well, let me go in a different direction then, because one of the things that I find interesting is that Rohan Sinanan has, at least in one article, has come out to sing the praises of Stuart Young. The headline is, he's capable of leading the country. Now, acting prime minister and doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? Is this a sign of Rohan potentially siding with Stuart Young in the long-term struggle? I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks so, because there's a part of me that thinks Rohan Sinanan needs someone to follow. He's not up for the post of political leader, not because of his race, but because of ability, in my opinion, right? So, and it's also interesting that Young and Foster Cummings, they were the two people that the media has identified. Now, I don't know how true that is, except Foster Cummings and Rohan Sinanan are what I believe to be the two people behind the two different Balize houses, which were competing for attention, for lack of a better way to put it, with the reopening of Balize House. So now it's interesting that one of the people that the media has identified as a candidate, his potential direct political opponent has come out in support of the other candidate. So I don't know if you may have any thoughts about that.
I don't, because I'll tell you what, Rohan Sinanan doesn't necessarily need somebody to follow. Rohan Sinanan is an individual that, again, I've had criticisms of, but bearing in mind that he's an individual from whom I understand was very much influential in running the campaigns in 2015 and 2020 on the part of the People's National Movement. And I also understand that he is very much a backbone in the PNM, especially for the Prime Minister. So I don't think he necessarily needs someone to follow. But the other question that you're going to ask yourself is, would you have expected any of the sitting MPs, senators, or ministers to say anything against Stuart Young, at least publicly? Would you have expected them to express anything against Stuart Young being acting Prime Minister publicly? Internally, it's something else. We're not privy to what is happening internally. Again, we were more privy to that with the United National Congress and their internal happenings. But everything, again, is a lot of speculation with the People's National Movement. I would not have expected them to say anything other than we support Stuart Young and we think he's the individual whom because the Prime Minister appointed him as acting Prime Minister. We support him.
But Keaton, here's the thing. Because I think the PNM was trying to say, hey, this thing, the leadership is not in chaos, and this thing is not a question, and they didn't necessarily want to bring this thing up in the national conversation. But the media did. And Minister Sinanan's statements, the timing is interesting, because if I understand no one is going to bad talk Stuart Young as acting Prime Minister or his potential candidacy for future political leader of the PNM. But the thing is, generally speaking, the ones who don't like him are probably the ones who are not going to say anything. That's really the choice. The choice is to praise him or to not to praise him or to degrade him. And Minister Sinanan is, I think, making a overt, active choice. He's actively speaking out to some degree. It's one thing to say that he's good as acting PNM. He's a good caretaker, but he said he's capable of leading the country at a time when the media is basically saying Rowley wants Stuart Young. He's saying that publicly. I have a hard time thinking that his statements are innocent and they mean only what they literally mean and there isn't more behind it. Because basically, it's hard for his political opponents to just take it at face value.
So if I'm, again, we are speculating, and I'm stressing on that point because when we have these debates, we usually have a lot more information to go on. When we have these conversations, we usually do. And I'm just curious to know, and using your logic, if roles were reversed, if Colin Imbert was now acting prime minister, or even if Foster Cummins was acting prime minister, and they spoke about, and the media approached Ron Sinnan, Camille Robinson Ritchie's, Fitzgerald Hines, Brown, any of those, what are your thoughts? What would their response have been? You see, the thing is, with all that is happening surrounding Stuart Young, is unfortunate comments that took place 2 weeks ago. And though he has apologized, I bring that up again to say that there needs to be support behind Stuart Young coming from a party's perspective. He has been in this quite a lot. So he's going to need that level of camaraderie on the part of his MPs. And this is the thing, you have to understand, this is what the PNM have always done, in my opinion, a lot better than other political parties. They have, at least from what I've seen, always had a unified approach. Even if internally there's a lot happening and it's unfavorable to MPs or ministers, publicly their approach has always been one of unity. And that's something that is very hard to deny. So I'm wondering if there was anybody else. I'm certain that these MPs would have said the same thing, because at the end of the day, Stuart Young, again, could be after Stuart Young's comments, the Prime Minister saying, well, listen, I'm putting Stuart Young to act again as Prime Minister. This is showing the level of confidence we have in him. This is showing his capabilities. Same thing could be said for anybody else. That's just the approach to how things are in the party. Looking at things from a different perspective, is Rohan Sinnan laying his is he putting things in place to look after himself beyond Dr. Keith Rowley? Possibly, quite possibly. But we will not know until that time comes, will it? Maybe he's laying that platform now. Who is going to be the next individual to lead the People's National Movement? Your guess is as good as mine.
You see, the one thing though, Keaton, is if it was about Imbert, the context would be very different, because Imbert being older, being arguably less popular just naturally by default, and the media was not touting him as a successor, right? So the timing of Sinnan saying what he said and any others, while the media is speculating that he is a successor, it's very interesting, it's very curious that they're willing to go on the record to that extent. Sinnan didn't just support him because of his current troubles. It was that specific, and maybe he didn't think it through when he said, I think he could lead the country. But I wanted to switch gears really fast and just bring up another. You did say that the situation at UNC, there was more information about it, and now we're potentially seeing some of the fallout of that situation, which we spoke about in the past with the 5 dissidents. Mr. Jack Warner, he said that he may want to come out and run for his old seat again. And MP Dinesh Rambali said, but I want to also run for this seat, and is looking to see if the UNC's political leader will allow him to do so. To some extent, do you think MP Rambali's request is realistic?
Mr. Rambali's request is realistic. That's an interesting twist to the topic that you brought up. Listen, it's first of all, Jack Warner, Vasan Bharat, these are individuals, even Ford Khan, these are individuals who had the world of no good to say about their opposition leader previously, right? They had the world of no good. And if you take a look at Vasan Bharat, just weeks before he appeared on a UNC platform, he said that people view the UNC and the PNM as being two sides of the same coin. These are individuals that had nothing good to say of the party. Within the last year, a lot of that has changed. Started with Jack Warner, you've seen that happening with Vasan Bharat. Now Ford Khan is saying, I'm willing to serve if that is the case. Again, this is what I'm saying. I think I mentioned it a couple of days ago. There's a lot happening inside the United National Congress, and they seem to be trying to put things in place or in order before the next general election. As it relates to Dinesh Rambali, I think, unfortunately, these 5 MPs, only time will tell of their fate, but if they were moved in Parliament and more or less sidelined on the bench, if their contributions to the budget debate, if their contributions, their response to the budget's presentation on the part of the Minister of Finance were not even considered in posts to social media or media releases on the part of the UNC, but every other MP or senator's contributions have been shared, doesn't that already suggest where their future lies within the United National Congress? Rambali has filed his nomination papers, right? What he's trying to do, what these MPs are trying to do, is essentially speak about the democratic process within the party. They went up democratically, as was their right to do so, and challenged the current executive. It didn't work out because they were seen as a threat to the opposition leader, and so they were sidelined. So in other words, now that we are filing our nomination papers, we want to serve again. We exercised our democratic rights. It didn't work out. Cool. We still want to serve again. Let's just see how democratic internally the United National Congress is. MP Rambali's request is not too much. It's a long shot, but he has every right to go up again as Shoguna's West MP. The thing is, Shoguna's West is not seen as a marginal. That is something to bear in mind. So if Dinesh Rambali is put there, he will more than likely get it, of course. But if you speak to people on the streets of Shoguna's West right now, what are their thoughts and opinions of Dinesh Rambali as a member of parliament? Would we get that as a question as an elected representative, or would they answer the question as him as a member of the UNC? That is something to think about as well.
I think ultimately a lot of these issues are because we don't vote candidates, we vote party, and then we lament, oh, things are so bad, and the other party is so bad. The other party is always so bad. Huh? It's not like the flaws are not shared, but the other party is so bad. Well, sorry. I understand, Caller, yes, the PNM have been in power for most of the last 60 years, but there's specific flaws I think Keaton and I and other political analysts will look at with regards to how our politics operates, that we lament it is that way, that it's party before individual merit, and because of that, there is no real such thing with that of individual merit, except your ability to campaign and your ability to raise funds and your ability to help win elections.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that an earlier than expected, I think I've asked you this before, but for the sake of debate again, do you think an earlier than expected general election will be called?
So I actually thought that the stalled convention was an indicator for a later election because they need to get their house in order and then call a late election. But I could see where a stalled convention could be for an early election because they'll try to have the election, then get their house in order after the fact, and maybe try to use the election. Usually, you use the internal election to give you the mandate to then go on with your party to contest the general election. But ironically, this could be a case where you use the general election to give you a mandate to have power to then win your internal election. That could be at play here as well. What do I think is going to happen? Right now, I would be surprised if there's an early election because the results of the economy, the results of crime, but even better, some of the things that were said from the budget debate, Keaton, like what the Minister of Tourism said, are so bad and so I can't use the words that I want to use, right? That to call an election is basically to have the election be based on some of the negative press and some of the foot-and-mouth statements that you made in the last 2 to 3 months. And I don't know if that's wise, but the flip side is, I don't know if waiting will improve the situation or cause it to get even worse. Could you imagine the situation getting worse, Keaton, in 6 months and then calling an election?
Yeah, but I
still think it's going to be later. I still think it's going to be later.
I think, yeah, I think so too. And because the more and more I think about it, when the Prime Minister has not cut the ribbon to the airport in Tobago as yet, why would I call a general election? When I am going through the final process for selling the Point Bear refinery, why would I call a general election? So when I have indicated that Corporation Solar is going to sell their 49% stake in Clipo, why would I call a general election? These are things that are going to generate a lot of money and a lot of headlines. And I don't think that when you have those things in play, it's particularly that airport in Tobago, I've stated this time and time again, the airport in Tobago is the Prime Minister's legacy.
He has a new hotel, He has a new 5-star hotel to replace the Sandals project.
That is currently
Annie
on the
Marina.
table. Yeah. But Sean, which one is going to be completed before November of next year? Right?
He could open the other two.
Yeah. Yes. I'm going to build a 5-star hotel in the span of 10 months.
No. What I mean to say, he could turn the sword.
But he could turn the sword. You could turn the sword. Cutting the ribbon is something completely different.
All right.
Different. So, and as I said, that's his legacy. Why would I call a general election before that? Again, I don't know. I'm only looking at these things and trying to analyze it and trying to think about it.
30 seconds. 30 seconds. You don't have to ask this now. 30 seconds, right? We'll take a break and then we'll open the phone lines later. Who will the next election? Peter, what you would see? Who you take winning?
Sorry?
Who you think winning the election? What's your prediction? I've peppered you with this question multiple times now, so I need
who I think is going to win the next election.
Yeah. This is the third time I've asked you. I know you're not going to answer, but I need to keep asking.
No. I will try and answer. Hopefully, Trinidad and Tobago wins the next election.
Folks, with that, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll open the phone line. Stay tuned.
This is 10 questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for. It's called loss and damage. And we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
You are watching Strictly Legal on WESN Content Capital. Just give an overview of what exactly is that split arrangement.
Nah, you don't need to register nothing. You don't need, we can do that another time. But then it becomes a hit, and then everybody starts to want to claim.
The laws that predate many of the independent countries' constitutions are going to be those colonial laws.
We know there are an infinite amount of circumstances that would lead to a murder.
I have a great idea and I have a great concept, but until it's actually expressed, it does not become intellectual property.
Accomplishments or targets of a forensic accountant is to quantify what may have been lost.
They believe we defend criminals and we manipulated the law and we exploiting the system.
A responsible journalist will reach out to the person who they have the information on for a comment.
All right, now's the time we open the phone lines. Apologies this week. I had an allergic reaction to a lot of the things that politicians say. Politicians say the darndest things, folks. But Sean Michael Small here with Keaton Shaw, and you have a chance now to have your say. We're going to open up the phone lines, and we have our first caller from Digger Martin. Good morning, caller, you're on here.
Good morning, Mr. Small and Mr. Shah. First of all, election. And let me answer a question. 5,000 murders is too much. 5,000, and who dead, and we're not providing, we're not responsible for safety and security. Anybody else than people who allow 5,000 people to die. 5,000 is equivalent to half a constituency. So it mightn't contribute to changing the voter pattern and things like that, but that is the heinous thing we are faced with. I am a sitting duck. Any number could call. If I open my gate, I'm a sitting duck. Because you know why? Coming back to the TPPS, I can't trust them. I can't depend on them. If you call them, they come in 3 days after. They wait for the crime to happen, to come and try to mitigate it, to correct it after. I want them to be in a mode of prevention. And the leadership doesn't understand that. You could hear them in the press conference. Look, for example.
Quick.
You have on a network where they try to kidnap this young lady in a Prado. Did the police respond to that as yet? They have to come. Once you have on a network that you see somebody, a potential kidnapping, and a SUV, and the host said the police is under their vehicle. So you imitation police again. It's happening too much now. So the police is directly facilitating, and the leadership is contributing to everything that happens.
Okay, caller. Thank you, caller. We have Faizaban on the line. Good morning, caller. You're on there.
Good morning, Sean. Good morning, Keaton. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago.
Morning.
Okay, Sean, you see perseverance and persistence breeds rewards. And so the financiers of the PNM would have finally get the reward that they needed with the appointment of Mr. Stuart Young or perceived potential as the leadership of the party. Mr. Imbert doesn't have a chance because remember he had that run-in with the Elias family to get with the building of the stadium in Greendot. So he is not in good standing with that sector of the society, the 1%ers. And so hence the reason Dr. Rowley wouldn't put him as the leader. He has to put somebody that is palatable to the financiers. You follow what I'm saying? Because, I mean, simply, you cannot reward rudeness. And the Prime Minister has slapped the people of Trinidad and Tobago with a backhand slap, brother. Just after that rudeness in Parliament, to put that man as acting Prime Minister. But where are we going? We're going nowhere fast. Have a nice day.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you very much, caller.
I mean, yeah, that whole Stuart Young thing. Okay, we have Sugar on a sunny line. Good morning, caller. You're on here. Caller, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning, morning.
Yes, I remember some time ago the question of reparation came up. And you all promised to have a program where we will go in detail because you said it was a complicated matter.
Yes.
I haven't heard it. Do you still have to have that on reparation? Because I am still haven't seen a proper case for reparation in Trinidad. There may be other countries who have a case. We don't. Do you intend to have?
I mean, I'll be honest, right? Like,
I've had this on AM Prime.
I don't know if I want to have this conversation, depending, because I do feel that a lot of it will come down to semantics and definitions and ideology interpretations and not, and there'll be a lot of arguing around the point.
But the fact is the fact, and the basic fact is the people who catch these slaves and sell these slaves are people of African descent. How you going to give money to them? The people, on the other hand, who is talking about pay for this, is people who pay for them. And they pay the African people for them.
I mean...
You see any argument against that?
Well, it's just, this is the problem where you take modern values and you apply it to the past. It gets complicated.
No, I agree with that. But then you have to, if you go by the values in those days, slavery was permissible. But then why you have to get reparation now?
Interesting argument, Paul. Very interesting argument.
I mean, my thing is, it's impractical unless you potentially use such money to make sovereign wealth funds, right? What
does that have to do with it?
Again, so then we'll have to go into the validity of reparations in the first place, which I don't want to necessarily get into. But what I'm saying is a lot of the issues I have with reparations are to just give people money, individual people money, is not necessarily the most useful, beneficial thing. People might think it's beneficial.
That is beside the point. If something is right, it's right.
Well,
and the question is here, a lot of people talking about reparation here in Trinidad, but not a single one of them would put up their proper reasoning behind it. That's my big problem. Okay?
That is true. Thank you, caller.
Thank you.
I do think
I mean, I've had conversations of this on AM Prime, and I'll be very honest with you. My questions remain as to how you even calculate reparations.
How do you even calculate it? Yeah.
How do you determine what reparations are unnecessary? You know, how do you identify all
who gets it? How do we determine which, let's just say Trinidad, which section of the population of African descent were not the free colored who owned slaves?
No, but then do you even think about do you even think about it as the chattel slaves, or is it all of Trinidad and Tobago that is to benefit from reparations? It's all those things
that second part, Keaton, that is also very complicated, but ironically, yeah, that's also very complicated. We have two callers, Faisbad and Tobago. Faisbad is technically first. Good morning, caller, you're on there.
Yeah, good morning again.
Quick.
With respect to the reparations, England has clearly stated they are not going to apologize. They are not going to do anything with respect to reparation. They're not even entertaining the conversation. With reparation, the emancipation, when we had the celebration the other day, there was a guy from Africa, one of those African countries, that came to Trinidad, Dr. Rowley welcomed him. And if you look at the economy at that state, it was based on the trade slaves. They sold slaves. That was the economy was based on that primarily. So have a nice day, my friend.
Thank you, caller. Tobago next. Good morning, caller. You're on the air. Caller, good morning. You're on the air.
And good morning to you, Sean.
Morning, morning.
I heard the point that the professor made.
Yeah.
One, I would like to endorse that some sort of conversation be had on the matter. Hold on a minute, someone's trying to call me here. All right, Sean, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
All right. Right. So some sort of a conversation needs to be had on the matter, right? A panel discussion. It can be put together where persons that are confused about what reparative justice is can get the answers that they need. So I think that, and we have the people here in Trinidad and Tobago that can form that panel and provide the information that people like the professor need. 2, reparative justice is not about money, or it's not only about money. Money is a very small part of reparative justice, especially for what the African went through by the European, right? You can't really quantify that. If you try to quantify that, you'll be approaching over $100 trillion, right? And the economists put that together already, right? Over $100 trillion. So that's just something that's a road that is not the road of pursuit for the African, right? 3, Africans were not slaves. We were enslaved. There's a vast difference. Enslavement was illegal, no matter who tried to make it legal, right? Murder is murder, no matter who tried to make it legal, right? So just because a government who invaded another place and hijacked it, put a law in place that says it's okay for me to own you,
well, but caller,
whip you when I want to whip you. Let me finish. You let the professor finish. Let me finish. Right? Own you, whip you, do whatever I want to do. Treat you less than an animal because we were chattel enslaved, not just the regular slavery, but chattel enslavement. That's a vast difference, right? There's nothing legal. No one can legalize that. You understand? You cannot legalize. You can't take a man and reduce him to less than a dog because you want to. And it's within your laws that you could do that. There's human rights and there's civil rights. Maybe in your civil rights case, it's legal for you to do it, but in a human rights case, it is not. This is why the United Nations, their founding was that this was the greatest crime against humanity. You understand? They labeled it a crime. Even though the governments, the British government and the French government, they all said, hey, it's legal for us to do this to Africans. The United Nations in 2001 founded that this was a criminal act. They committed a crime, right? So that's...
If I may just interject, I apologize, but for the sake of giving other callers an opportunity as well, caller, I want to thank you because I know you've called in before and made this point, but we will try to have a program on it, and I know I've had it, and I know Sean will do his very best to have a program on it, and we can have more for discussion then, but let's give other callers an opportunity as well. So thank you very much, caller, for your contribution.
Before you go, caller, the one thing I wanted to say, though, as far as I'm aware, European colonization of Africa happened after the slave trade essentially happened. I don't believe the slave trade started off due to invasion. Okay, I think we lost the caller. Also, historical human rights violations, if we try to provide reparations for that, and this is where do you draw the line, right? Is it just for the African slave trade? What about the Barbary Coast slave trade or whatever? Like, human rights violations, I hate to say this, human rights are a modern concept. They've been violated. Modern human rights have been violated throughout history. What do we limit reparations? We have. I
just wanted to make a quick correction to the call from Faisal. Keir Starmer apologized, but said reparations out of the question. So he did offer an apology, but said it's out of the question.
We have San Fernando line. Good morning, caller. You on here?
Good morning, Sean and Keita.
Morning.
You know, I had no intention of calling in this morning, but you see this issue with reparations, forced my hand. And it is so, I listened to the professor, the caller from Faizabad, with the simplistic interpretation of what reparations supposed to mean to them.
Yeah.
I refer them to, firstly, go and read the report from the University of the West Indies, which was spearheaded by Dr. Hilary Beckles, which makes a case for reparations. They need to go and read that first before they make a comment. And let me say this too about reparations. This is not about the people who, as they say, sold the slaves. This is about the people. This is about the people who were sold into slavery and their descendants and the beneficiaries of those, the major beneficiaries of that trade. And let me say this as well. Reparations was paid when slavery was abolished. Reparations was paid to a lot of plantation owners and that type of thing. They got reparations. So what ridiculous stupidity are these people talking about? Go and read Dr. Hilary Beckles' report fully. Let me finish on. And I'm challenging these people. The people who called in and want to deny reparations are not any descendants of African people. And I'm saying that boldly to you all on this program.
Mm-hmm.
Have a good day.
Thank you, caller. I mean, all I'll say is this, though. You can't talk about the beneficiaries of the slave trade if you're not willing to include the people who sold the slaves.
Honestly,
now,
I would just want to say that this is exactly why this is such an intense conversation, and this is why when Professor made the point that there should be a program with individuals on it, and even the caller from Tobago, Mr. Pigott, you see how everyone has conflicting opinions on it.
Keaton, here's the thing. I actually have issues with how it's been communicated, framed, referenced, described, and the points made on both sides just this morning, right? How the professor referred to it, how it's been defended. Like, I find the situation, to be honest, is it brings up far greater implications than the proponents even realize now. It has far greater complexities than even the detractors realize, to be honest, because yes, I do think it was oversimplified by the people who spoke against it this morning. And yeah, I think I would disagree with most people who will be either for or against reparations. I'll probably disagree with a lot of what both sides have to say, to be honest. It's one of the reasons why I hesitate to have that show. But it is what it is.
So what I'd say to the individuals who have viewed Talking Point this morning and to the caller from San Fernando who made the point to read the report. There are two reports available by Professor Hilary Beckles, who, and I've been able to read both. The first one was published in 2013, and it was entitled Britain's Black Debt, Reparations for Caribbean Slavery, and Native Genocide. There was a second report that he issued in 2021, and that was How Britain Underdeveloped the Caribbean, a reparations response to the European legacy of plunder and poverty. Those are two reports. They are available online. For those who are wanting to have a conversation or a better understanding or grounding, you can read those two reports. But I would also like to mention there are also responses to Hilary Beckles' arguments. There are responses to his arguments that are also highlighting the flaws in his argument. So you can also read those as well, and let's see what your opinion is from there.
I just like to point out, after World War I, Germany had to pay reparations. And some people would say that led to the situation that led to World War II. And I'll just leave that there. When you get to the point of a nation state, things are not that simple. It's not as simple as this person did a crime against me, so he needs to be punished appropriately. You don't have to like that concept, but that is the reality at the end of the day, unfortunately. Morality of nation states don't really exist, to be honest. And yeah, if nations had to pay for the crimes that they did to each other, the Atlantic slave trade, as much as one of the callers wanted to say it was the greatest, so it probably is not going to be honest. It is but one incident in history that is obviously one of the worst that we know of. And it might actually be, ironically, one of the ones that we could quantify the most easily. But I think if you compare to the rest of human history, I want to say that it's the one big thing that needs to be addressed. There's a lot in history that needs to be addressed.
There's a lot in history that needs to be addressed. There's a lot in history that cannot be addressed. And in this particular instance, there is absolutely no harm in having a conversation. And it seems as though the impression that I'm getting is that first world nations are hiding from having that conversation.
Probably,
first world nations are wanting to have those conversations. I think it is prudent for everyone who has called in and everyone who's viewing the program to take an interest in this. And again, go and read those 2 reports by Sir Hilary Beckles, and you can also read counter arguments against it. There's also one by Rashid Griffith that you can read that argues against Sir Hilary Beckles' those 2 documents that he published. So people do some research. Everybody has an opinion, and nothing is wrong with having an opinion. Do some research though, so we have an informed and educated opinion.
I just want to close with this. Thanks to all the callers. I understand the passion. My disagreements with you are probably not along the axes of which normally this debate happens, which is one reason why I don't want to enter it. Thanks, of course, to Mr. Shah. I just want to end with this, and Keaton, I'll let you close the show. Peace is not, and we're not entitled to peace, and there are a lot of things that we think we're entitled to that, technically speaking, we aren't. There are things that we fight for, there are things that we defend, there are things that we build society, we base it on, and we try to protect and ensure. But I think we sometimes underestimate how fragile these things are. So, is the first world countries running and hiding from this issue? Yes, they probably are. They don't know how to face the politics behind it. Should they be? No, they should face it one way or the other. I do believe that. So I'll agree with you there, Keaton, but this is just one of those things where I fear it's more about politics than actual. I know emotionally for a lot of the people who are not involved on any actual level in the debates, in the actual political spheres, it doesn't seem like that to them. I think this is mainly about politics, but for the politicians and for the activists. But I'll leave that there. Just remember your allegiance to your twin island republic and to each other. And hopefully this will not be another issue that can indirectly divide us. Keaton, if you could close the show.
Today is a good day to have a good day. Might I stress that, again, we are all entitled to our opinions, but ladies and gentlemen, I can appreciate the healthy conversations and debates. So thank you very much for your contribution to the program and to, of course, the viewing public of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm glad to see that people are taking an interest in a lot of what is happening. So, as I said, today's a good day to have a good day. Have a good weekend, a safe one. If you've taken extreme cautions before and looking after yourself, you got to double those efforts now, because that's the society that we're living in. You can't even go to the beach without being robbed. But ladies and gentlemen, have a good weekend. We'll see you again very soon. Bye-bye.